nominee Joe Biden still has a big decision to make who his running mate will be. And he's going to want to make sure that they appeal to the voters who are socially liberal, but more fiscally conservative. He may want to we think at least two of his opponents. The National Taxpayer Union, which is a conservative advocacy group, gave both Senator Amy Klobuchar and Representative Val Demings failing grades on its annual fiscal scoreboard for Congress members. That means they tend to support measures that increase government spending and raise taxes. So should Biden take Klobuchar and Demings off his list? Or does the fiscal stuff not really matter for him? To weigh in, let's welcome Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold. Brandon, thanks for joining us today. Brandon, talk to us about the scores that Amy Klobuchar and Val Demings received.
Sure. Well, we round up literally hundreds of votes. Any vote that a member of Congress casts that pertains to taxes, spending, significant regulatory action, we factor into our scorecard. And what we found out was, yes, Amy Klobuchar did very poorly. She had a score around 41%. Val Demings did absolutely horrendous. Her score is 6%. She got a failing grade of an F. And to look back at some of the other potential picks for Biden, I did take a look at previous scores for Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris. Both of them didn't vote enough because they spent so much time on the campaign trail this year. But if you look in prior years, they both did very, very poorly as well. That should come as no shock to people who pay attention to how they do in response to a lot of questions about tax and fiscal policy. But they both got Ds on our 2018 scorecard. Not enough data for 2019, unfortunately, but they have not shown a strong fiscal record in support of taxpayers in the past.
Yeah, give us a little more clear evaluation, like the 3 or 4 top things that you're really looking at.
So it varies. We can only work with what they vote on in Congress, of course. And sometimes they vote on a lot of great legislation. A few years ago, we had a great tax relief bill, for instance. We had a lot of deregulatory action taking place. And we're able to look at these fantastic votes that were taking place. This year, it's been more of a mixed bag, of course, this past year, because a lot of the legislation they voted on was either outside of the fiscal space, or it was very negative legislation, particularly in the House of Representatives. We had a smaller pool of votes to work off. We were working off of things like appropriations bills. The most heavily weighted vote was the Bipartisan Budget Act, which would authorize $1.7 trillion of spending increases over the next decade. So if you voted for that piece of legislation, and most Democrats and a number of Republicans did, you got dinged very, very heavily on our scorecard.
Brendan, do you think that this matters and as far as who Joe Biden will pick? Because we already know that Joe Biden is talking about a tax increase and all of the things that he wants to, have taxpayers pay for. So do you think that it matters?
I'm not sure. I mean, if you look at Biden's record, I went back and pulled his data from his time in the Senate. Of the 17 years of data that we had, he got an F 14 of the times. So he's obviously not tremendously worried about how National Taxpayers Union views his voting record and his legislative record. But I'll say this, I think a lot of voters in the middle that may be undecided, that may want a fiscally responsible president and vice president in office, because let's be clear, Biden is if he is elected, is probably a one-termer. And the VP selection is very, very critical for determining who's going to be the future of the Democratic Party. If he wants to move forward with a more fiscally responsible candidates or options out there like Val Demings, I don't think fit the bill, nor do Elizabeth Warren or Harris or maybe even Klobuchar, who might be a little bit more conservative than them, but not much more so.
Well, Brandon, there must have been a lot of Fs out there to have $21 trillion in debt before we even got to this emergency situation. So thank you, Brandon Arnold, for shedding light on some of these topics. Keep it here on American Agenda.